time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Got some good news, got some bad news, got some good news. Let's start with the bad news. Let's get that out of the way first. Another domestic terrorist wielding a knife drove his car into a checkpoint, killing one policeman, injuring another in our nation's capital. And again, domestic terrorism, real thing. Fortunately, and I don't say this often, but fortunately, the driver who jumped out of the car wielding a knife, shot and killed. Good. Bye. At some point, we got to stop these terrorists from pulling this stuff. At some point, we got to stop this. It's crazy. And I'm not talking about mental illness. I'm talking about it's lunacy. Also, shots fired in the area of the Capitol. Everything locked down. This isn't who we are. Or at least I hope it isn't. Our thoughts go out to the family of the police officer who was killed. Second Capitol police officer killed in the line of duty so far this year. And yet you have the former guy say, no. Love the police. Love the Capitol Police. On that January 6th, people just giving hugs and kisses to the police. Really good relationships. I wonder what the former president's going to say about this. Terrible, terrible, terrible times. Let's move on to the good news. Major League Baseball, they have announced that they are going to be pulling the All-Star game out of Georgia. That has everything to do with the fact that the Republicans have moved on voter suppression bill that many are calling the reincarnation of Jim Crow. And look, you can cry all you want, complain all you want. This is a private entity doing what they think is in the best interest of their industry. This is, again, conservatives. This is private interests pursuing private interests. You should be all in favor. This is the market speaking. You should be all in favor of this. Because I know how important suppressing the vote, especially in a state like Georgia, is to many of my conservative friends. Because then, you can keep control of the state. And it's interesting that a number of companies have come out and made statements because of pressure. And this is what happens when we, the people, begin to wake up, raise our heads up, and raise our voices, and start demanding that corporate America do something. Now, I blame this all on corporate America for them being pulled into the middle of this. And yes, they are. Because they got themselves in the middle of this. If they were just saying, hey, we're corporations, we don't take sides in anything, we play straight down the middle, we don't get involved in lobbying or pushing for legislation or buying politicians, then you could say, oh, poor corporation. Not in this moment. So going to be interesting to see how this plays out. A lot of very angry conservatives got some interesting responses from people. But this, again, is one of those weird kind of moments where you go, you should be in favor of a private interest doing what it wants to do. This is it. Also, some good news on the jobs front. 916,000 jobs in March were added to the rolls. Economists were expecting a big month. Economists were expecting 675,000, 916 blew right past. And this is on top of the larger than expected month, the month before, where we had 379,000 new jobs created. Unemployment fell from 6.2 down to 6%. And Joe Biden, and I got to give Joe Biden credit. Again, the more I see him, the less I hear from him. The more he does, the more I like him. He was asked, do you take credit for that? Mr. President, you take credit for the big jump in jobs numbers? Take credit for that? And he stopped, and he goes, no, I give credit to the American people. And he walked away. No grandstanding. No, I did it all alone. No, you should praise me. None of that. None of, look at how wonderful or how smart or how talented or how my hair looks. None of that stuff. None of it. Just doing the job. That's what I like about this guy. I like the fact that he's just doing the job. Doesn't need a pat on the back. Doesn't need praise and adulation. Doesn't need any of that. Doesn't need his ego stroked. None of that. Just doing the job. And again, pushing in the right direction to get more jobs, to get people the ability to lead that American dream that I really believe to his core he believes. I mean, you see a lot of politicians, they say a lot of things, they pander a lot. I think in this moment in Joe Biden's life, and I think he knows the road isn't much longer. He's got, maybe 10 more years. Maybe hopefully for him a little bit longer, but he knows he's a short timer. And he wants to leave that legacy for his kids and his grandkids and his great grandkids that he made this a better place. I truly believe that. There's no political ambition in this guy right now. There's no worrying about re-election, which is why the woman who came and asked the question during his first press conference, do you think you're going to run for re-election? Should never ask another question again. She should be excluded from any place where there are questions at all, let alone being able to ask one. Just doing the job, man. Just doing the job. And leaving all of the insanity and all of the political circus and all the mind-numbing craziness to the Republicans. I love the fact that Joe Biden hasn't said much. Comes out, here's what I'm doing. Here's the job. Going back to work. Going to roll up my sleeves, get back to work. We started the week off, we had Ted Cruz in his docu-safari. Down on the border in Texas at midnight, surrounded by armed people. He's no Steve Irwin out there, fiddling with sharks. He was surrounded by people to protect his sorry behind. Talking about infant babies and, mothers nursing and, again, mind somewhere else. Didn't seem to have any concern about that for the last several years, but now he's discovered something. And maybe it was something, look, I'm not saying he didn't have an epiphany in Cancun. Maybe that trip when he was running away from the people of Texas who were literally freezing to death, maybe he had an epiphany, a moment of clarity. Maybe there was something there. It's been known to happen. People have had a come to Jesus moment. Maybe it was for him while, sipping daiquiris on the beach. Maybe, something, got between those ears. I'm doubting it. But maybe I'm going to give somewhat the benefit of the doubt. So you had that. You had Trump rewriting the history of January 6th, saying, no, there was zero crisis. There was no threats. They were hugging the police and they were kissing them and they had great relationships. Yeah, there was that. Then you had Marjorie Taylor Greene and her, the mark of the beast, vaccine passports and all of her lunacy. And now you got, this week also, I guess this morning, the Senate Majority Leader of Kansas, I can't even say his name, Gene Suellentrop, evidently was driving drunk 90 miles an hour down the wrong side of the road for miles. They arrested him, I guess 9 felony counts is something that they said. For fleeing, attempting to elude police, misdemeanor charges of drunk driving under the influence, that kind of reckless driving, a slew of traffic infractions. I don't want to be the one who has to pay his fines, but he is stepping kind of aside, transferring his leadership. Now remember, he's the Senate Majority Leader in Kansas. If you want to know what's the matter with Kansas, maybe they've drunk too much of the Kool-Aid and someone spiked it. So he's going to be gone for a while. Also, Montana, one of my favorite states of Montana. Especially my good friend, the Teamster president, Aaron Foley out there, who did a fabulous job pushing back on their right to work, bringing people together. Good on you. But they've got a Republican representative, guy named Caleb Hinkle. He wants to put a gun on the state flag. Just a couple of days after the shooting in Colorado, that's what his brain came to. We're going to have a gun on the state flag. Now, this is in response to a Democratic representative who wanted to study perhaps changing the design of the flag, putting it before the voters. Let's make it a little more like, hey, you might want to come to Montana. Hinkle wanted no part of that. Hinkle wants a gun. He wants everyone to know that Montana's a gun state. And in his amendment, he said that Montana's pioneers, miners, soldiers, native tribes, hunters, ranchers, and more have been touched by 200 years of firearm diversity. Now, for me, look, I learned a little bit of history as a kid. When you threw the native tribes in there and guns and them being touched by those guns because of their obvious diversity, I think I agree with Democratic Representative Jonathan Windy Boy, who is a member of the Chippewa Cree tribe, who said, quote, when you're talking about firearms and the history of Native Americans here, we're always at the end of the firearms. And I kind of agree with him on that. So I don't know. But it goes back to that gun fetish thing. Got to have it always with you. Always that warm, fuzzy feeling that they need to have because there's a whole bunch of insecurities around who knows what. But there is that. Also, one of my favorite crazy stories of the week came out of Texas. Don't know what's the matter with Texas. Probably the same stuff that's wrong with Kansas. Evidently, this is one of those weird kind of things. This former pro wrestler, guy named Big Dan Rodmer, he ran for political office in Nevada. He lost in 2018 for a bid to be a legislator in Nevada. So I guess he moved to Texas, found an accent, has got the hat and the chaps and all kinds of stuff, and now he's riding a bull in his ad because he's running for Congress in Texas's 6th congressional district. I understand there's no depth to where these people will go. I just find it hysterical because I watched some of the clips of each, and how on one place he's very straight and very speaking normal words, and then a very almost a caricature of a Southern accent. Someone when you're trying to make fun of it in the worst way, this is him, and he's not trying to make fun of it. He's just now, as one person has mentioned, he's just hicking it up, and in a really bad way because he thinks the people of Texas are stupid. And the fact that they voted for Ted Cruz, I don't know that I can argue. So we'll see how that plays out. I am now, the 6th congressional district in Texas is now highly on my radar to see if they're dumb enough to fall for a carpetbagger who has now made up a phony Southern accent. Because understand, and why this is really important is Radomir grew up in New Jersey. They don't really have that Southern twangy thing going on. Just kind of throwing it out there. Another crazy moment, and again, another one of my favorite moments, and probably my favorite. I'm gonna stick with this one being my favorite one of all, because it shows where Republican legislators and leaders think the American people are. Missouri State Representative Justin Hill, obviously a Republican. He has probably said one of the dumbest things I've heard. Now, understand, Hill is a guy who skipped his own inauguration, his own swearing-in ceremony, so he could go to the insurrection rally in D.C. on the 6th. Just so we know what his bona fides is. He's going to D.C. Gonna insurrect with the rest of them. On the guy who wants to abolish the court system in Missouri because he claims they can't be impartial. Evidently, during a debate on the state expanding Medicaid, because understand, the voters of Missouri said, hey, we would like to have what other states have when they expanded their Medicaid. When they covered a whole bunch of people, a whole bunch of working class and lower wage working class folks. We'd like to have that. And the voters voted for it. This is what the voters wanted. Now remember, we're told that the voters get what they want, which is why we have to have these elections. According to our good friend, the representative there in Missouri, Justin Hill, he was against it. He said, quote, "Even though my constituents voted for this lie, I'm going to protect them. I'm proud to stand against the will of the people." Now remember, his job is to do the will of the people. That's the job. He's not king. He's not dictator. He's not the CEO. He's a representative. See how that works? You represent. So if your constituents are saying, this is something we really want, and you say no, the hope now becomes that the voters in that district say, you got to go. Now understand, and this is how the game is played. I'm sure Missouri, much like Pennsylvania and other states, is heavily gerrymandered to where this guy is probably very safe. So you could argue that he was doing the will of his constituents, his small number of people in his little gerrymandered district who are probably well off enough to ensure that they get the health care that they need, ensure that they don't go broke when they do get sick, and ensure that they get the best care. I'm sure that's a big part of this. But the fact that this guy now feels emboldened to come out and say, I don't care what voters think. I don't care what the people want. I know better than they do. And look, in states that have expanded Medicaid, the number of bankruptcies have gone down. The number of people without insurance has gone down. And oh, by the way, care has gotten better. You know, we used to think about all of us. We used to think about how we move the country forward. Yet we've got some of these folks who are more than willing to show their colors. Because this is a very Republican thing to do in this moment. And look, I keep saying, Republican voters, take your party back. Somewhere back to sanity. Somewhere where you're going to have representatives who are going to stand up for people, are going to make sure that people have better lives, get better jobs. Our infrastructure is rebuilt and better. We can do it. I know we can. Quick break. Right back.
More American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day workers at the Hershey candy plant in Hershey, Pennsylvania, sat down. CIO organizers for the new United Chocolate Workers Union reported that anywhere from 2,000 to 2,400 workers were on strike. Hershey was a company town where streets were named Chocolate and Coca Avenue. Housing was built for workers, and the company funded public education and transit service. But the company also sought to monitor and control workers' behavior on their off time and showed favoritism in hiring and wages. The Great Depression created dire conditions even in the sweetest place on earth. Hours and bonuses had been cut. Workers grew increasingly frustrated with production speed up and unpredictable work schedules, all while Hershey still drew handsome profits. The company initially raised wages after meeting with the union, but then laid off the organizers 3 months later. That's when the workers shut off their machines and occupied the plant. The company refused to negotiate unless the workers left. By April 7th, dairy farmers became incensed at the loss of income. They mobilized with anti-union company forces to storm the factory and drive the strikers out. Organizers had agreed to end the strike in order to resume negotiations and avert violence. But the anti-union forces attacked the sit-downers with bats, whips, clubs, and hammers. 3 CIO organizers were singled out and severely beaten. Governor George Earle condemned the attack and blamed the county sheriff for suppressing labor rather than preventing mob rule. The strike was smashed. Attempts to install a company union failed soon after. Hershey would be one of the first candy companies to be organized when the Bakery, Confectionery, Tobacco Workers, and Grain Millers International Union won recognition 2 years later. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Matt Gaetz all over the news. All over the news except for over at Fox News. Evidently, Fox News has not mentioned his name in over 30 hours, which I guess not surprising. While the other networks, they can't stop talking about him. And I'll be honest, if he took my teenage daughter across state lines, we'd be having a very, very long talk. Not with very few words, but we'd be having something. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on Matt Gaetz and all the craziness that goes around that, I've asked our good friend Max Burns to come talk with us. Max is a Democratic strategist, also a columnist over at the Daily Beast. Max, thanks for taking time for us.
Absolutely, anytime.
So I've seen it. I've seen this is stupid Watergate. This is Watergates. It's all kinds of crazy thoughts on the representative getting himself in a little twist.
Yeah, and what this seems to be probably most appropriately called is a potentially major criminal investigation against a sitting member of Congress who is accused at this point. I mean, the more we learn, the worse this picture gets for Matt Gaetz. Accused not only at this point of potentially sex trafficking a child, but also in trafficking other women he paid for sex out to his Republican buddies in Florida. And I mean, if this looks sort of like a trailer park version of what Jeffrey Epstein did, the only difference is in the scale of it. I mean, it is not that different in what they were intending to do.
That is an excellent frame for that. That is an excellent frame of trailer park Jeffrey Epstein. That fits him. That's probably the best description I've heard yet. And look, he's one of these guys that nobody is unhappy seeing this happen to him, because from what I'm now hearing, and I think what's being reported is, this stuff's been banging around for a while. It's just that he had the protection of Trump in the White House, and nobody was paying attention to it then.
Yeah, the protection of Trump in one hand, and also the protection of the silence and complicity of the GOP in the other. I mean, there are Republicans who have now said off the record to Axios, to Politico, that they encountered Matt Gaetz on the floor of the House, sharing photos of his sexual conquests. And now I would imagine quite a few of those people who maybe laughed and slapped him on the back and said, good going, might be talking to their lawyers tonight about whether they were unintentionally looking at child pornography. And that's a really serious situation that shows you just how fully the accountability structure of the GOP has collapsed.
Yeah.
That nobody said a word.
It was interesting to me, and when I knew this was serious, I watched the clip of the interview with him and Tucker Carlson, and Tucker Carlson just dropped him in one of the best ways, where Gaetz is going, hey, you remember we had dinner together? He's like, nope, I don't remember any of that.
Yeah, it should stand to reason that every Tucker Carlson interview is kind of a train wreck, but rarely do you see Tucker Carlson or any Fox News host actually come out after the interview, as Tucker did, and basically tell his viewers, listen, I have no idea what just happened. That was a weird interview, and we don't know what the truth is. So at this point, even Fox News is cutting bait on Matt Gaetz, who just a few days ago was shopping around there for a job.
Yeah. No, isn't that interesting? I mean, I woke up the other day and he was saying that he's thinking about retiring, going to go into media. I guess Newsmax was, he was thinking about Newsmax. And then it was like 5 hours later, this all broke.
Yeah, and there's a lot of speculation that these are tied together, that maybe Gaetz is trying to get out ahead of this. But this isn't an investigation Gaetz will be able to outrun. This has already ensnared his friend, the Seminole County tax collector, on 33 counts in his most recent indictment. And these have more and more started to point to Matt Gaetz, as the DOJ seems to think. This is going to be something where without a Bill Barr or a Donald Trump to have your back, there are real problems coming Matt Gaetz's way really fast.
Yeah. Did you get any background on how the father was wearing a wire? Because I'm still trying to figure out why the father was the former congressman. His father Don was. Why was he wearing a wire?
This whole story is kind of crazy. And what Matt Gaetz tried to do was muddy the waters about what happened. He's saying that this has come out because he's being blackmailed by someone in the FBI who found out about the investigation and wanted $25 million from him. Now, that still doesn't resolve the question of, in order to be blackmailed in the first place, there must be an actual investigation going on.
Right.
So even if we admit that this does make Matt Gaetz very blackmailable, it doesn't erase for a second the reason that happened. And that's going to be what gets Matt Gaetz, not this attempt to paint himself as a victim.
So now you got to start asking questions of, why they let it go so long. How much of, maybe, and I hate to bring Russia into this, but the same thing with Trump. How much dirt do anyone, name the group, Trump himself, the Russians, whoever, how much dirt do they have on these people to make them do the things they do and the control that they have over them?
Yeah, it just shows that the idea, all these Republicans who laughed at the idea of compromising material and say, oh, we could never be blackmailed, actually appear to have quite a bit that they can be blackmailed for. And Matt Gaetz was among the loudest voices talking about QAnon, child trafficking, all the while running his own little dime operation in Florida.
Yeah.
And it really should make a lot of these Republicans ask, are these the good guys, or are we actually on a side of abetting this, what would essentially be serious child abuse?
Yeah. Now, look, Democrats have had their problems in the past as well, and I'm sure there will be in the future. But I look at this, and this is somebody who was up on a high horse, and look, the media built him up there, and they're having fun watching him being torn down. I think they'll have fun when he ends up going to prison, because I think a lot of these could carry some pretty serious charges, especially taking a minor across state lines in Florida, where the age of consent, I found out, is 18. There's no 16 or 17 with a couple-year difference. It's 18. That's it.
It's absolutely. And Matt Gaetz continues to refer to a 17-year-old woman, but legally, you're right, she is a girl, and that is a crime. And we're looking at some of these charges are 10 years in jail for what Matt Gaetz is doing. And it raises serious questions about not only his judgment in general, but was this affecting the way he was governing? He was one of the few to oppose tougher anti-trafficking legislation. Now we have to ask if he was doing that to protect his little side hustle.
Yeah. No, because something about fake IDs and all kinds of stuff. And again, I go back to, being a parent of teenage daughters. If someone, like I said, if someone like him came sniffing around, we're going to have a long conversation with few words.
It's one of the dumbest, in a way, one of the dumbest capers we've seen yet, because you have Matt Gaetz and this guy facing 33 charges of sex trafficking, tax fraud, stalking, and they're making fake IDs. They're just printing them out on the desk right in front of the security camera. I mean, the sense of untouchability that Matt Gaetz must have had is truly delusional. To think that he could just run government services as his personal, side profit operation really shows you how out of touch the GOP has become.
Yeah, he claims he's not going to resign. He will not resign, and I don't want him to. I want him to be arrested, tried, convicted, and booted out.
Oh, absolutely. I would love the opportunity to see Matt Gaetz thrown out of Congress for this and for so many other reasons that he has deserved to be thrown out and has so far survived. But this one looks like it may be too much.
Yeah, I don't want the Democrats touching this. This is a Republican problem, just like Marjorie Taylor Greene was a Republican problem that Democrats went and solved for them. Because, I've yet to find many people who are on board with this idea. I don't think the Democrats should have gone after Marjorie Taylor Greene. They should have left her on those committees so that every time we talk about education funding, we go, we need more money. See, here's why. You end up like this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm skeptical, honestly. I think the risk of having her in actual policy-making committees is so dangerous. I mean, we're talking about the functioning of the federal government, and she's managed to obstruct that enough just as somebody who has nothing else to do.
Yeah, but
I can't
I'm a guy who
imagine the
believes
kind of
in
nightmares.
speech. I want stupid to be talking as much as possible, because the more stupid talks, the more I'm going to listen, and then we're going to use that against them. I think the more opportunity you get her to expose just how corrupt they are, I think, just my thought, the better off they are, better off we are. But I wanted to get some of your other thoughts, some of the craziness of the week. I wanted to get your thoughts on Ted Cruz taking his docu-safari down to the southern border and discovering that there's a problem.
This reminds me so much of Sarah Palin when she was kind of auditioning for a reality show and posted all these sort of home movies in various action scenes on the border and riding a horse. It just shows you that Ted Cruz is not interested in doing his job in the Senate. I mean, he's missed more votes than most members of the Senate. And it's because he's busy auditioning to get on Sean Hannity's highlights clip, to make money on Twitter, talking about immigration and picking fights with, musicians who are pro-immigration. This isn't someone interested in being a senator. It's a person who wants to be a celebrity, because honestly, that's a lot easier.
No, and that seems to be like a lot of them. That it's about feeding their narcissism. It's about feeding, their egos. And this is why I love Joe Biden right now so much. Here's a guy who just shows up. He does his job. He doesn't want any credit. I mean, today was a perfect example. A woman shouted out, "Hey, you take credit for those 916,000 new jobs?" And he's like, "No, I give credit to the American people," and went on his way, went back to work.
And that's the magic that I think works for Americans, is that we've had a president since Joe Biden came into office who you feel safe not checking up on every minute of every day. It's not that you ignore him. Activists still hold Joe Biden accountable and push him to the left every day. But you don't have to worry that there's going to be some catastrophic crisis created by the president. And a sign that this is going really well is that you see candidates like Madison Cawthorn, who are actually campaigning on a stimulus bill they voted against.
Right.
And if legislation is that popular, that Republicans are going to pretend they support it, what on earth are they hoping to run against Democrats on in 2022?
I'm right there with you, which is why I think this infrastructure plan has to get through, so they've got nothing left. I wanted to get your thoughts on the announcement today. Major League Baseball is moving the All-Star game out of Atlanta. I'm not sure where I don't know that they've announced where they're going to move it to, but all because of what Brian Kemp and the Republicans did on returning to the good old days of Jim Crow.
And we're seeing this maybe just the beginning. I mean, after all of this voter suppression legislation that they forced through, these Republicans that position themselves as job creators, the party of business, are at risk of driving Coca-Cola out, at risk of driving Delta out, which is said that they're considering their options. And now they've lost an all-star game. And the thing that upsets me the most is that Kelly Loeffler had the audacity to use Hank Aaron's name as an excuse to say this is a disgrace to Hank Aaron. Hank Aaron, an athlete and a leader who opposed the GOP's attempts to vilify Colin Kaepernick, who supported kneeling for the anthem. Hank Aaron would support this completely. And it is disgraceful to see them trying to play this game.
No, it's incredible to me. But what I find interesting is that the guy that Donald Trump reached out to and said, "Hey, can you find 12,000 votes in the sofa cushions for me?" And I still think that needs to be investigated, and he needs to be held accountable for it. They threw the guy that he was calling under the bus as well. This Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. Because they want to take the power away from it, even though he did absolutely everything that they asked of him to do. Except for, outwardly in a criminal fashion, find 12,000 votes in the seat cushions.
Yeah, Raffensperger pursued every questionably legal method possible to suppress the vote, to stop Black Georgians from voting. The only thing he wasn't willing to do was literally and without cause invalidate an election that it wasn't even clear he had the power to invalidate. And that was insufficient loyalty for the Republicans. I mean, let this be a sign that Republicans are not mincing words. They're being very clear. They have no use for democracy if that gets in the way of Republican victories. and they will get rid of everyone, including Republicans, who stands in the way of making it harder to vote.
No,
And
and to highlight that point,
that's
just a
the
story.
Republican platform.
No, I mean, just a story I talked about a minute ago. This Justin Hill, from Republican from Missouri, who on the floor, I guess, of the Senate the legislative floor in Missouri, said that he was, what was the word? He was proud. He was proud to stand against the will of the people, even though his constituents voted to expand Medicaid. He was going to protect them, and he was voting against their will, and he was proud of that. Which just says, they don't care about what the people want. They care about their power and their ideology.
Absolutely. And I mean, we are in an acutely dangerous place. And as great as it is to see Major League Baseball, Coca-Cola, Delta speaking out in Georgia, we are not going to be saved by mega corporations that care about what's good for mega corporations. We're going to be saved when activists get out like Stacey Abrams motivated people to do and elect Democrats on the state level who will undo this damage. Let's build that, and we can praise Coca-Cola after we've secured the vote for Black Georgians.
There you go. Lastly, I wanted to get your thoughts on the events in the Capitol today. Another Capitol police officer murdered by a domestic terrorist. Fortunately, he was gunned down, so we don't have to worry about that. I wanted to get your thoughts.
This is absolutely tragic. I mean, the Capitol Police have seen more death and more mayhem just in the first couple months of 2021 than they've seen in years. And it really reminds us that for all of the justified things that are coming out in this Derek Chauvin trial, all of this reckoning that we're finally having with race, that for police like the Capitol Police, who are trying to do their jobs, who are risking their lives to protect people, they're not receiving any kind of meaningful support from the GOP. There are Republicans who voted against giving these people the Congressional Gold Medal. And now another one has been taken from us in a senseless act of terror. And we need to address this. We need to get serious and really look at Capitol security.
No, and there needs to be a crackdown on these, these anti-government types and the militia types and all of this, because it's getting to the point where it's out of hand. And I don't know how you put this genie back in the bottle, but way too extreme.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's marked by a lack of faith in institutions. I think a stress and a frustration about the economy, about COVID, about any number of real or perceived injustices. I mean, this is the Department of Justice's number one domestic priority, as Merrick Garland has said, and it needs to be, because they are not joking around.
No, we got absolutely got to do something. But Max, I appreciate the time. Always great talking with you. I hope you'll come back and share some more thoughts with us.
Absolutely. Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. Max Burns, Democratic strategist, columnist over at the Daily Beast. Make sure you check out his work. We'll get links out on how you do that. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. That was the day that Montana Republican Jeanette Rankin was sworn in as the first ever woman elected to the U.S. Congress. Her mother was a school teacher, and her father was a rancher. On her victory, Representative Rankin said, "I may be the first woman member of Congress, but I won't be the last." Rankin was dedicated to the causes of women's suffrage and improving social welfare, especially for women and children. She was also a staunch pacifist. She was one of only 50 representatives who voted against the United States' entry into World War I. Her stance cost her politically. After one term in the House, she ran for the Senate but lost. Losing her place in Washington did not slow Rankin down, however. She became the field secretary for the National Consumers League, a post she held for 3 years. Working from the famed Hull House, she traveled around the Midwest speaking for women's rights and workers' rights. She lobbied state legislators to support minimum wage laws and to reduce the long hours required of many workers. She was a major advocate for the child labor amendment. This proposed amendment to the U.S. Constitution would have required Congress to regulate all labor by children under the age of 18. 28 states ratified the amendment, but it never reached approval by 3/4 of the states required to amend the Constitution. In 1941, Rankin returned to Congress. There she continued her dedication to pacifism, where after the attack on Pearl Harbor, she cast the only no vote on the U.S. entry into World War II. The very unpopular vote effectively ended her political career. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So riding in the car today, hit a bump that I wish wasn't there. Bought my wife a new car. It's one of those, you spend a lot of money on it. And every time we hit one of these gigantic bumps, it's like, that's going to cost me money. Every time we hit one, I start thinking about how much the alignment is going to cost, how much new tires are going to cost, how much damage is being done to this, her dream vehicle, because we haven't invested in our infrastructure. And now's the time, please, because I don't want to have to pay this stuff. And here to share some thoughts on why we need to invest in our infrastructure outside of my minor self-interest, I've asked Trevor Higgins to come talk with us. He's a senior director of domestic climate and energy policy at the Center for American Progress. Their website, americanprogress.org. Trevor, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick. It's a pleasure to be here.
Like I said, outside of my minor trivial front end alignment problems, the country's got real problems when you look at infrastructure. I think something like 173,000 miles of road like I'm driving on, something like, 45,000 bridges, transit systems that are broken, waterways, airports, you name it, we got problems.
Yeah, that's right. And I would add to your litany, we've got lead pipes that need to be replaced. We've got a manufacturing base that is stuck in the last century and needs to get ready to compete. And we've got an entire infrastructure is so much more than just the roads and bridges. Not only have we got the backlog there, we have to get to work building an economy that's going to work for the decades to come.
No.
Or else we're going to be in trouble.
No, you're right. The one year when I worked in Harrisburg. It was like the sinkhole capital of the world. I think there were like 45 sinkholes in the city when I was there. And it was like buses, the whole rear ends of buses being swallowed up, garbage trucks, anything driving down the road, just falling through the ground. And it's because of our infrastructure. It's because the sewer lines are like 125 years old. They're clay pipes that are cracking, and the water's just eroding things away. And they've known about this since the 70s and just have never had the political will or who's going to pay for it to get it done. And now, fortunately, we might have a president and an actual plan to get some of that accomplished.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, we have an entire economy that essentially needs to be rebuilt from the ground up to fix the infrastructure, to fix the energy systems, to stop the grids from failing, to prepare for climate change. All of this stuff has to happen. On the other hand, we've got 9 million people out of work. So it's, I think the genius of this plan is to say, let's solve both those problems at once. Interest rates are essentially zero. We've got free money. All we have to do is decide what are the right projects and how do we get the right people doing them? How do we give them good wages, make sure it's unionized, and get to work?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of good that can come from just breaking free the kind of the shackles of fear about deficits or debt, and actually look at what's the payback. If we spend money now, we get back an economy that functions, that's going to carry us forward for decades to come.
Ultimately, you can look at this pandemic as kind of a silent blessing, and I don't want to go that far, but it's made us address a number of problems immediately that have been around for decades that we've just kind of kept pushing to the back burners. But I think this is that moment, and I think Joe Biden, while he wasn't my first choice, he is rising to the moment in a way that I'm pleased with. Would I've liked to have seen this bill that they've proposed be much bigger? Absolutely, but this is a good start.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's got all of the right building blocks, and like some of the, I think there's room to spend more productively in a lot of these places. And if Congress wants to pay for it, I think there's ways to pay for it. If Congress wants to borrow, I mean, this is silly, maybe it's too old, but the Erie Canal, that was paid for on bonds. And like, I'm from Buffalo, New York. Like that made my city. Like here I am 200 years later, and like the entire economy of Buffalo was built because of that one canal. And that's this kind of forward-looking vision that we have to have right now. And we just aren't going to get that many bites at the apple. If we can't get this stuff fixed, if we can't get working, the American workers aren't going to be able to compete with like global international pressures if the industry of America isn't ready to put them to work. And that means a transition to kind of the way of the future here.
No, that's an excellent point. And look, there's an opportunity to change the way we do things. Like you talk about electric cars, we don't have the infrastructure for it. This is an opportunity to build that infrastructure that we need to move to that next generation of transportation. But here's a problem. We don't have the kind of workers that I think we need. I think our economy for a very long time has been moving us towards a service-based economy. Thank you, Ronald Reagan. As we were giving away our manufacturing, as we were destroying what productive capacity we have, we got a bunch of people who can push papers around, but not many people who can swing a hammer. So we got all these projects, we got the money for it, but do we have the people to be able to do this work?
Yeah. Well, I think you're right that a lot of people do. I mean, there are some good service jobs out there, and they could be better, and they would be better if they were unionized. And part of what this plan talks about is how to make sure that we're supporting the kind of care workers that are doing real work to support, our grandparents and
our human infrastructure, right?
So that matters too. But you're right. There's just so much actual physical infrastructure we also have to build. I mean, part of what's in this plan is billions of dollars for training, for matching people up, and for building the manufacturing capacity in the communities that need it. Places that were dependent on fossil fuel extraction have people who can do this work, and we can put a new manufacturing plant to build heat pumps there that are going to provide zero emission heating for everyone's home in America. And we can build the battery manufacturing plants that we need for electric vehicles in the places that have the workers already ready to go. And it's not like magic. It's just money. If we can spend the money to build the manufacturing capacity we need here, then we can compete with the money that China is pouring in and that Europe is pouring in farsightedly to prepare for the way of the future here.
Yeah, but Trevor, we're broke. Yeah. Haven't you heard?
Right. We can't possibly spend any money.
Congress we spent it all on the last guy.
Yeah, well, I mean, if Congress can spend $2 trillion like that, I mean, literally overnight in handwritten bill, like they couldn't even take the time to type that bill. They were writing it by hand on the floor to pass a tax cut bill for corporations and the wealthy. I'm pretty confident that we can find the wherewithal to actually pay for the investments we need.
Now, the thing that I like about Biden's plan is he actually did figure out a way to pay for it. The fact that we haven't been taxing corporations the way we should. In fact, I think the numbers they gave, 91 of the Fortune 500 companies in 2018 paid zero taxes, which is just disgraceful. And I forget the average of the Fortune 500 was like 8%. Well below the 21 that it was, and certainly well below the 28 that it should be, or the 35 that it was before Trump, or the 56% it was back in 1953.
Exactly.
But there's an opportunity to get some money to invest in our infrastructure so those businesses can thrive.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the president has proposed to raise the corporate tax rates not even to the level they were 10 years ago. Right? This is just putting it back to a reasonable rate and fixing the international loopholes that let like this pharmaceutical company hide $1 trillion of profit overseas in Ireland. It's time to end those shell games and actually pay for what we need to make American industry and American workers have a future.
Now, I tell all my conservative friends who, they're against tax and spend liberals. And I say, look, I'm a proud tax and spend liberal. I'm fiscally responsible. We need to fix our roads and bridges. We need better broadband access, especially in rural areas like where I live. We need better airports. We need better, you name it. We need to upgrade, but we also got to pay for it. In my household, when I need to get something fixed, we borrow money, we pay it back. That's how we should be doing things. And Biden has figured out a way to do this. We just didn't put it on the credit card like we did with the tax cuts.
Yeah, I thought that McConnell's statement about this was kind of funny. He said that he's all for infrastructure, but not if we have to raise taxes to pay for it, and not if we have to borrow to pay for it. So how exactly are we supposed to pay for it? How much do you really like infrastructure?
Magic dust.
Yes.
Well, no, because if you remember, Republicans, a couple years ago, they were all in favor of a $2 trillion infrastructure plan. In fact, a lot of them who are against it now were all in favor of it back then. But Trump seemed to get them to believe that he had this magic plan somewhere tucked away like his healthcare plan in a secret box somewhere that would solve all these problems and wouldn't have to raise taxes or pay for it. He just had some magic. And we had lots of weeks with cute pictures of him holding on to steering wheels. And, we had lots of good photo ops. Exactly. But, you got to pay for this stuff, right?
Yeah, well, that's right. I think that those infrastructure weeks that became a joke during the Trump years were mostly a talking point. People thought the word infrastructure sounded nice, so they said it. And that's not what we're talking about right now. I mean, This plan that President Biden put forward is real.
For me,
he said it in his speech. He's not thinking around the edges.
For me, the word infrastructure means jobs, and not just any job. It means good union jobs. Which have good health care and good retirement security and safe working conditions and a voice on the job and all of those things. So, before Joe Biden became president, I was calling for a couple of things. One, fire Peter Robb on day one, which he did. Nice job, Joe. And to include the PRO Act in an infrastructure bill, which he also did. Nice job, Joe, number two. So I'm going to keep saying things that I want because I'm hoping he'll keep doing it. But I think having the PRO Act in this is just as important as any other component because people's lives have to get better from the work that they're doing. As our communities get better, so should people's lives.
Yeah, that's right. And also in here are requirements that the funding come with Buy America provisions, that the funding come with prevailing wage requirements, that the new tax incentives for renewables, which is the future, we have to build so much renewable power. And we have incentives in here to give more money to the companies that are unionized than the ones that aren't. That's going to transform this industry. And in the absence of that, it won't. So we're going to build that power one way or the other. I think we should build faster, and I think we should build it with union workers. And this is the key to doing that. So there are a lot of pieces in here. I mean, the training I already mentioned, the workforce development, funding, the targeted investments in new capacities in the areas that need it. There's a lot.
No, and we need this is the weird thing. We need a lot. And I often bring up Thomas Friedman, who I'm not a huge fan of, but he had a great line, and I give him credit for it every time I say it. He said he came from China back to LAX, and it was like coming from the Jetsons to the Flintstones. I don't necessarily like being the Flintstones.
Agreed.
So we need to do much better if we're going to compete with China, because we've given them our manufacturing base. If we're going to be competitive for the next generation of jobs, if we're going to be competitive in controlling what happens around the globe, we better start doing this stuff and soon.
Yeah, think about what happened with photovoltaics, the solar panels. We had an American manufacturing base. We had American-driven technology. We had research and development coming out of the national labs, driving down the cost of these panels. And we kind of fell asleep at the switch. And China invested a bunch of money in its manufacturing capacity. And now they produce all the solar panels. And it's not hard to see where things are going. Like we know that electric vehicles are coming. And we know they're going to need batteries. And we're watching China start to make the same playbook to invest their money in building the battery manufacturing capacity.
No, they've
We
they've
can't do
written
it.
the book. They've given us the book. The China 2025 plan is the book. We know what they're going to do. They're going after aerospace, robotics, electric vehicles. They're going after all of the jobs of the future. They're no longer going to put up with doing the crappy, dirty manufacturing that they stole from us. Or I'm sorry, they didn't steal it. We gave to them.
Right. We can't let them take that again. So all we got to do is invest in the capacity to build those batteries here so that we've got the electric future, that we're leading the future on the electric vehicles that we know are coming.
Yeah. So last line of questioning I've got, because look, we've had a big love fest. This is fantastic. It's going to do good things. It's going to put people back to work. It's going to be fabulous. It's going to be transformational. We're going to rebuild our economy. It's going to be a different economy. It's going to be a just economy. All that stuff is going to pass.
Yeah, I mean, that's up to Congress. I think we have heard good things, and there's, like we said before, Republicans like to say the word infrastructure, but so far they've said no. The president's put this out there, and they've said, no, that's not what we mean. Pipes for black people, no, they can drink lead. That doesn't count as infrastructure. And that's not going to cut it. And what I heard the president say in his speech in Pittsburgh was, he's willing to work with any Republican when good faith wants to get this done, but we have to get it done. And that list of proposals there, if they want to pass that through reconciliation, they can do that. And we can do this with or without the Republicans in the Senate. If they aren't going to do this in good faith to negotiate, that's fine. There's still a way to do this. So I'm optimistic. I think the need is to have this passed by summertime. And I think Congress has every tool available to them to do it. I think the more money that they put on the table, the more needs they'll be able to address, the easier it will be to put together a bill. And I hope that it covers everything from the clean energy sector to transit to clean water, kind of the full scope of what we need. Because this isn't like a nice to have thing. It's not just a way out of a quick fix for our current problems. If we don't build for the future that's coming, we're going to be caught flat-footed, and we're going to be suffering with kind of continued unjust pollution and concentrated in communities, destabilizing climate, and with jobs that can't compete globally. So this is urgent. Like, the time is now.
No, I'm right there with you. And this, for me, is that moment. I think back to my grandparents' generation. They left a legacy for their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren. They built an infrastructure. They left something behind. The last couple of generations they haven't done that. This, to me, is that opportunity. But I gotta throw this at you. I just want to get your reaction to the South Dakota governor, Kristi Noem, who said, "I was shocked by how much doesn't go into infrastructure." She said it goes into research and development. It goes into housing and pipes. Evidently, housing and pipes in her world, not infrastructure.
Yeah, I thought I was kind of alluding to that before, because I thought it was so hilarious. It's such nonsense. Like, if we're pipes are infrastructure. The way you get your water to your house, that's infrastructure. The way you drive to your house, that's infrastructure. The way the lights turn on in your house, that's infrastructure. It's part of our society. It's what our economy is built on. It's what our lives depend on.
Yep. But Trevor, I appreciate you taking some time for us, sharing your thoughts on this. And I'm hoping we get something through. I'm hoping this happens. And as it does, I hope you'll come back and talk to us again.
That's my pleasure. Thank you, Rick.
Good stuff. Trevor Higgins, Senior Director of Domestic and Climate and Energy Policy there at the Center for American Progress. AmericanProgress.org, the website. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. When you go shopping, do you remember to look for the union label? On this day in labor history, the year was 1909. the American Federation of Labor launched its Union Label Department. The goal of the new department was to promote goods and services made by union labor. Union labels today, often referred to as union bugs, have a long history, going all the way back in the 1400s. Some European tradecraft guilds used visual symbols to represent their work. In the United States, the union label became more prevalent after the Civil War. The AFL sought to promote the use of such labels to build solidarity among the labor movement. It was also a way to promote the quality of union goods and services to the public. 30 years after the label department was launched, AFL President Andrew Green explained the importance of the effort. He said that a union label was emblematic of a high standard of living, of tolerable conditions of employment, of those conditions surrounding working men and women, which makes for a higher and better standard of living. In 1975, the International Ladies Garment Workers Union launched their Look for the Union Label campaign. Television ads and a catchy jingle helped promote the cause. Today, the AFL-CIO's Union Label Department publishes lists of companies boycotted for not using union labor. They also produce a bi-monthly newsletter called Label Letter, which features information about modern-day union labels. All of these efforts seek to raise consumer awareness about the labor that goes into the items and services we purchase every day. It helps shoppers make informed decisions about how they spend their money.
Remember somewhere our union sewing, our wages going to feed the kids and run.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Joe Biden today had his first phone call with the Ukrainian president, and my first thought was, I don't even really care what they talked about. How much you going to put down that this doesn't get him impeached? That was my first thought, and how this is such a non-story that our president's going to actually have a conversation with a foreign leader that's not going to be a national embarrassment. That's where I want to start off today with our big panel. I have asked our good friend Khary Penebaker to come talk with us, gun violence survivor, every time survivor fellow, also treasurer of the DNC's Black Caucus. Khary, thanks for being here. Richard Ojeda, former West Virginia State Senator, presidential candidate, and currently the executive national spokesperson for No Dem Left Behind. Richard, thanks for being here. And also Scott Dworkin, co-founder of the Democratic Coalition. Guys, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, boy.
So let's start with the phone call. Let's start right there. Do you see an impeachment coming out of this phone call?
Absolutely not. I mean, there's nothing wrong when world leaders are having are actually communicating. It's a good thing. And once again, this is nothing under the table type event. So I think it's outstanding.
It's the president doing what the president does. Khary, you got a thought? I think your microphone's off. Nobody can hear you.
Yeah, I think this is another example of what it looks like to have an adult back in the room, where you don't have to worry about, one, the news coming out of that conversation, and two, is he going to say something that might be impeachable, or three, is he focusing on his own interests rather than the country's interests? And I think this is just another example of how starkly different Joe Biden is than what our former occupant of the White House used to be.
Yeah,
right,
Republicans will act like, right? They're going to act like it's impeachable, whatever he did, because I'm guessing it was not pro-Putin. And so, they're going to talk about, he needs to be impeached because there's a quid pro quo here, because he's doing diplomacy for the United States of America, because he wants to send troops there. He wants to work with NATO to make sure that the rest of Ukraine is not invaded. So, I think Republicans will cry foul just because they cry foul about everything.
Because they've got nothing else to say. But again, this is what being presidential looks like. This is what being a leader looks like. Also, today the president was asked if he was going to take credit for the 916,000 jobs that were created in March. And he said, no, that's the American people. And again, it's what a leader does.
Right.
I will tell you, I think it's a huge breath of fresh air when what we're seeing with Joe Biden. I mean, he's coming out with policies and he's pushing things that the American people need. This infrastructure plan of his is going to create countless jobs. I mean, he's actually trying to do the job of being president. I mean, the guy, he doesn't golf. His weekend trips are to his home in Delaware, not costing us, the taxpayer, a fortune. I mean, I just think that right now, what we're seeing with Joe Biden is what we should have always saw, which is a president that is going to work every day for the American people. And I'm glad that we see it.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, and I think the other part of that, I mean, I think one of you said it a second ago, is that it's a breath of fresh air in that you're not always having to wonder and wait, what's the next crazy thing this guy is going to say or going to tweet, or how is he going to embarrass us next? You can harp all you want on him climbing up the airport or the plane stairs and all that. That I will take a tripping Joe Biden over a blundering Donald Trump any day. I will take a guy who is willing to do the job, not just do the job, but actually wants the job and everything that job entails, than somebody who just wants to act like president and just use the power that comes with the office. Joe Biden wants to be president. Donald Trump wanted the power that came with being president. He just didn't want the responsibility of it. And it showed in all of the things that he did that were contrary of what it meant to be the American leader. And I'm glad that the only thing that we have that we could laugh at or be even slightly embarrassed about, if you want to call it that, is how he walked up the stairs. But at least when he fell up the stairs, he didn't have toilet paper on his shoe when he did it.
And look, he fell down twice. He got back up. That's what
going.
I want. I want somebody who you trip, you fall down, you get back up, you keep moving forward. For me, it's that simple. Scott, you got a thought?
Yeah, he got back up and he saluted the troops and he acted like it didn't happen. You brushed it off his shoulder because that's what you have to do if you're the president of the United States. I think Khary said it's really what I think is really cool is we don't have to ask the same questions because Biden has no business interests. And so you don't have to worry about, oh, well, is this going to benefit his business? Is this going to benefit him personally? Maybe in the long run, he might be able to sign a book deal because he's the president of the United States right now. But it's not going to be, is he making money off his hotel? Is he getting bribed in this way? And so not having to ask those questions is great. And taking credit, that's exactly how it needs to be, where job growth is. It's the American people. It's not just him. It's not about him. And I think that return to a new normalcy will make, again, put a spotlight on Republicans and how crazy they have been acting lately. And they just look crazier and crazier as Biden and his administration equalizes that new normal.
I think also he understands and knows what it means to be presidential. And I think he also wants the American people to see a president that is presidential, a president that is not scared to stand up for the American people, a president who is actually going to work every day for the American people. And I think a big reason for that is because what we have seen for the last 4 was absolutely unpresidential. And I think he wants everyone to know how important it is for whoever it is that sits in that role is doing the right thing and fulfilling that role with honor. And I think that's very important with what he's doing.
I'm right there with you. But are you I get a lot of conservatives whining and complaining that Joe Biden doesn't do enough press conferences, doesn't make enough speeches. Are we concerned by any of that?
No. 3 days, 70 plus days. How many days? I mean, we're talking about with no transition whatsoever, basically. We're talking about with an insurrection that hit. We're talking about, so that's that terrorist attack. You have him refusing to leave office at first and us having to fight for that, us having to impeach him for the whole thing. And that stalled the Senate because Moscow Mitch sat there in his graveyard and was like, we're not going to move anything. So why are we here? They were in power for a very long time. They are why we were here, period. And there's a lot of other reasons, I'm sure, but the main reason is because they've done nothing, the negligence. They want to blame him for the immigration crisis. We're all to blame for the immigration crisis. So let's solve some problems. Stop pointing fingers. We can say Trump did this and this guy did this. That's great. We're here. This is what it is. this is the situation we're in. We can't fix it without them. And
Right.
so we kind of need to get over it and face the fact that it's time to move on. Like this is who our president is, man.
No, I'm
You-
right
you
there
know-
with you.
Go ahead, Khary.
So I think it's interesting that you have Republicans now, you have Joe Biden as president, that are complaining the frequency of press conferences. How long did we go when Sarah Huckabee Sanders didn't give a press conference, or the third or fourth in line in the communication team didn't give a press conference? They didn't complain then. What's happening is because they have no real interest in government. In doing the work for the American people, that they are only trying to find things that they can complain about Joe Biden. That's it. They want to hear him talk only so they can have something else to complain about. They don't want to make a difference. They don't want to find ways to make people's lives better. We are in the depths of a global pandemic. While these folks are telling you, hey, you have American people at home who can't go to work because of this pandemic, you have rich Republicans saying, hey, we shouldn't give them any money. But yet at the same time complaining that Joe Biden's not giving a press conference. I don't need to hear from Joe Biden at a press conference. I need to see a result. I need to make sure that folks get that $1,400 check in their pocket. I need folks to have access to mental health care. I need folks to have access to opportunity. I don't give a damn about Joe Biden's press conference.
I'm right there with you.
It's something else, though, too, also. There was no transition. And I think one of the main reasons why there was no transition is because President Trump didn't want to let Joe Biden know that there was no infrastructure for this global pandemic. Joe Biden has been working his tail off to try to get everybody vaccinated, and he's been doing amazing accomplishments while doing that. So, yeah, that's it. That's how it is.
Yeah, for me, it's just about getting the work done. I don't need to hear from him. Just get the work done. And I look at this infrastructure plan. While, again, I can sit here and say, I wish it was bigger. I'm happy that we're at least moving in the direction of $2.5 trillion. We're going to invest in roads, bridges, all that stuff. But also the other part of it, the human infrastructure of our country. Let's start with the amount. Do we think it's enough?
So real quick, before we really get onto that, the last thing I want to say about the last part we talked about is Chris Rock has got a phrase that he would often say since the mid-'90s, is that you don't get credit for he would use SHIT. You don't get credit for the things you're supposed to do. Right. And so the fact that you don't have Joe Biden on TV constantly patting himself on the back or having a press conference where he's got his cabinet in a room where they're all just kissing his butt the whole time, we don't need that, right? Americans need to see action, and not just in the terms of getting the results that we're looking for, but we need to see presidential action so that we can have some semblance of normalcy, so that he can show an example of how you're supposed to lead, so that folks can take that behavior and mimic it back in their own communities. So you stop having people who think we need to storm the Capitol. When you put all of that together, you get a much better result, and you don't need a press conference to do it. Now, back to your question about the infrastructure and all that. I'm actually glad that it is finally infrastructure week. Right, where we can actually do some infrastructure type of work rather than having whether it's going to be a conspiracy thing here or something else happening that way. They're actually trying to do the work. Now, I don't think you're going to ever get to a scenario where it is going to ever be enough, but it is a right step in the right direction, given that the Democrats who we do have may not outright support everything that Joe Biden and other folks might want to do, but I think it's a step in the right direction.
I'm with you. Scott, you got a thought?
I always say that we can always do more. It's a good start. I think that negotiations, they'll be able to expand. They didn't want to present something that was a behemoth, I guess, because they just had the stimulus. So this is more of like a political play, I guess. That's my...
Yeah, but they've paid for it. I mean, and the good thing is he's talking about raising taxes on the very wealthy and on corporations, and we're going to pay for it. And so what's interesting to me is you had Republicans all during the Trump years saying, hey, let's have big, huge infrastructure plans, now coming out saying, no, we can't afford this, or no, these are liberal dogma or a liberal wish list. It's crazy to me. Do you agree? Richard?
It's because they're the party of the double standard. You know, it's one thing in the military, we always say you can add to, but you can't take away. So if it's not enough, it's going to be, we can continue adding to it. We're talking about fixing over 10,000 crumbling bridges. You know, I mean, thousands upon thousands of miles of roads, you know, sea miles, for wind capability. I mean, to me, it's just great to see somebody who's trying to go in the right direction. We know that we need infrastructure in this country, and at least we're going in that direction. And like I said, you know, at the end, if we need more, then we'll get more. As long as he's willing to say that he's going to finally hold the people at the top, the corporations and the filthy rich, responsible so that they can ststart anteing up. I don't care how much it costs. Yeah, let's do it.
Let me ask you this, though. You got Joe Manchin in your state, who, in my view, should be saying, yes, we want to build West Virginia, let alone rebuild it. And he should be right in front fighting for the PRO Act, because West Virginia is home of the freaking UMWA.
Yes, I actually messaged Joe Manchin this morning, and I messaged him. I said, please tell me HR 1 is going to pass. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, I think Joe Manchin is playing a role. I think that he is kind of thinking about potentially coming back to West Virginia after this term and running for governor, because he didn't finish out his second term. And I think that's one of the reasons why he's trying to kind of be, you know, Republican light right now, because our state happens to be so far to the right. But at the end of the day, I'll tell you right now, he knows I will absolutely scorch the earth around him if he doesn't do the right thing.
I don't want to be around that earth. Khary, you got any thoughts?
I am, you know, having run for Congress, and, you know, run for a district that was the most conservative in Wisconsin, one of the most conservative in the country, have always been mindful of the fact that you are representing your district, not necessarily your party. So you have to do what's within the will of the people who are within the confines of your district. So there's part of me that wants to say that Joe Manchin is doing the will of the people of West Virginia, but I don't honestly think that is completely true. I think he is playing more politics than anything else, and I don't like to see that. I think he, in some ways, is developing an overinflated value of himself in terms of the fact that he could be like a swing vote, and is trying to like really hype himself up when that's not really what folks are looking for of someone who is trying to hype themselves up rather than hype up the American people and our needs. So that is disheartening. But there are things that Joe has done over the years that I think are good, and I think are worthy of admiration. But I think he also does some things that are very contrary to what the people of West Virginia probably need. And I think because he's trying to toe that line in between being a moderate Democrat and Republican light, that he is missing the point, and that he could really have a chance of explaining things to the folks who don't have a lot of money in West Virginia, or who might be in the Appalachian Mountains, or who might be coal miners, right? So you go back to the infrastructure week. One of the key things that the infrastructure policy will do is address climate change. And when you deal with something like that, when you have a coal-rich state like West Virginia, you could actually help people get better trained jobs, help people get better health care, wean the state and the country off of dirty energy like that. But yet he's playing this game, and I think that is very disheartening.
Yeah,
Joe Manchin.
Scott, you got the last word here. 30 seconds.
Oh, do you want to see something about Manchin?
I just wanted to say Joe Manchin needs to show the people in West Virginia what a good Democrat can do. I don't care about the Republicans. If he comes back here and runs for governor and this state is Republican, he's going to be a governor in a state that is full of Republicans in the legislature, and it's just going to be a fight.
Yeah, I think with Manchin, with me, I don't like the timing of it on both sides of it, where it's clear politics when he's like dragging things out and wanting to negotiate things when he has the bottom line in front of him. So you don't know which side is actually playing the politics, whether or not it's the Democrats that are playing the politics of like using him so that Republicans can't act more important than they are, or if they so kind of like toes that line. But he's got to pick a side
Pick a side.
stick in
There you
that
go.
lane
Going
at
to take a
some
quick
point.
break right here. Guys, stick around. We're going to be right back after this break. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1946. That was the day 400,000 bituminous coal miners walked off the job in 26 states. They demanded higher wages, better health benefits, and safety regulations. The strike began to cripple industrial operations nationwide. By May 22nd, President Harry S. Truman seized the mines. Miners returned to work a week later. John L. Lewis, president of the United Mine Workers, signed an agreement with Secretary of the Interior Julius Krug. It included wage increases and vacation pay, the 5-day work week, and contributions to a retirement fund. The strike led to the Promise of 1946, otherwise known as the Krug-Lewis Amendment. It created the UMWA Health and Retirement Funds. It is this fund that is often referred to in present-day discussions concerning the loss of retiree health and pension benefits. According to Robert Hartley and David Kenny, authors of Death Underground, the Centralia and West Frankfurt mine disasters, the welfare program was to provide medical care, rehabilitation treatment, and death benefits. It provided the authority for the director of the U.S. Bureau of Mines to establish a federal mine safety code, to enforce mine safety regulations, and provided the first legal authority for federal inspectors to close mines found to be dangerous. Lack of enforcement would prove deadly for miners in Centralia and West Frankfurt. The health and welfare funds, however, provided relief and security for miners for decades. But in recent years, many companies have gone out of business and found legal loopholes to shed their retirement responsibilities. Those miners affected are today fighting for the passage of the Miners Protection Act, which would provide access and funding to shore up the pension plan. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So another tragedy in our nation's capital. Another terrorist drove his car into a checkpoint, killed a police officer on Friday. Another one, I guess, not in good shape, but this is just another show of insanity in our capital. Also Friday, there were evidently gunfire near the Capitol, which had them shut the Capitol down. It's just nuts. And here to share some thoughts on, just what's happening in our nation's capital, I've got our panel: Scott Dworkin from the Democratic Coalition, Richard Ojeda from No Dems Left Behind, and our good friend Khary Penebaker, treasurer of the DNC Black Caucus. Guys, I look at this and it just seems like every day there's another one of these horror stories coming out of our nation's capital. We've had 2 Capitol policemen killed in the line of duty this year already. It's craziness. Let's start with you, Richard. Thoughts?
I think, maybe it's time to start talking about, maybe a pay raise for these Capitol Police, because, they have been just, drugged through the garden lately. The over 150 of them were injured during the January 6th attack. Now we have this. It's a scary place to be right now. And it's a tough job right now to be in.
Absolutely. What's sad is that they had been used. The Capitol Police have been used as political pawns under Donald Trump. And it's really sad, because at the end of the day, regardless of their job, they're still our fellow citizens. They're still fellow human beings. When you have 2 Capitol Police officers who complete suicide after the January 6th attack, plus the one that was killed there and the one that was killed today, you have to wonder, what are we doing to protect those who are supposed to protect the people that need to be protected? We're not doing enough to take care of these folks, both in security and with mental health care. I think it's a real shame that such little value had been placed on these folks. And I'm glad that Nancy Pelosi and other Democrats are trying to address the concern by having General Honorary there to address the Capitol security and things like that. And I'm sure he's going to come up with a plan that's holistic and is going to address all of that. But it's really a shame. And it's sad to see how far things have gone, and I hope it gets better soon.
Yeah, there shouldn't be an opportunity for this to happen. I don't care about the aesthetic, like what it feels like, the fence, if it's too imposing or whatever. Do what you got to do to protect the Capitol, okay? Because we're not there yet. It's not working. It's 2 police officers standing in between a barricade and then getting rammed by a car, and then a guy getting out with his knife like a crazy person. That's one person. This is just a lone wolf, it looks, but then we have to think about, is it a diversion from something else? Then the entire DC area goes on lockdown. It slows traffic in Maryland, Virginia, and DC itself on a Friday afternoon. I mean, so it causes a lot of issues for millions of people. And that's one thing. But at the same time, like, again, these people who are speaking out against it are the same people who supported the insurrectionists. So speaking out against heightened Capitol security. And so, again, I don't care what they say, just keep them safe, okay? Keep the Capitol safe and make sure that, I don't care if you have to have a gigantic barrier in between them. Do what you have to do to keep these police officers safe.
No, I'm right there with you. But I look at this. No, I mean, one of the things that I look at is just how we've allowed a handful of crazy people to completely change our culture. And look, I don't want to see giant fences all over. I don't want to see barricades all over. But you're right. If that's the only way we can keep these folks safe, then we have to do it. But it's just a shame that in the freest country hopefully the freest country on the planet, that we can't access our government buildings because of a handful of crazy people.
We have to also, ensure and realize that that's probably the most important building on the face of the earth. And it needs to be protected. And I'm telling you right now, it's no different than when we were in Iraq and Afghanistan. I mean, you have to set up, lines. And these are lines that you don't cross. And if you cross, there's going to be repercussions. I don't ever want to see what we saw on January the 6th. I will tell you right now, I wish they would draw a line and let anybody know that if you cross that line, you're going to be dealt with, and it's going to be brutal.
That's what happened, and that's what happened during the insurrection. Is there was a red line, and Miss Babbitt crossed it, and so there was a restraint of force only because most of the Capitol police officers have military training and enough where they can not just use their weapon, not just use their sidearm. They don't just. So they've had combat experience, so they're lucky it was specifically that. But man, don't you think that it's a monument within a monument. It's a monument itself. It's got monuments inside of it, and they're worried about monuments and all this stuff. Again, maybe it's going to be tough for people they have to go through a lot of security to get in, but you have to go through a lot of security to get in the White House. So if you want to go see it, then maybe you have to go through tougher security. But there's, if someone the fact is, if someone, a lone wolf, wants to kind of attack us, we really don't have that many defenses for it. And so we have to do what we can to prevent these things from happening and actually examine and figure out ways to do it, because this doesn't happen in every country. We have to think about that.
No, I mean, this is what's frustrating is I remember as a kid being able to go to the nation's capital and being able to walk right in. In fact, we got a tour of the White House and didn't have to go through 400 measures of security. That you could walk right up to the right along the White House fence, and now we could drive right along that. And now we've had to do this because we've got domestic terrorists.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, we have, well, not we. There's some within the government that have fostered that sentiment of domestic terrorism and really have become the champions for those who are truly anti-American. When you are telling people that you need their help really to overthrow the government, essentially, because you don't like the outcome of a vote. And then, I mean, when you really put this in context, right? You look at the restraint that the Capitol Police issued on January 6th in response to all of those domestic terrorists. Imagine if that kind of restraint was issued on a daily basis to people of color in the streets. Imagine if that kind of restraint was issued to George Floyd as he lay on the ground for 9 minutes and 26 seconds. Imagine if, Sean Bell was given that same kind of restraint, or that Tamir Rice was given that same kind of restraint, or John Crawford III was given that same kind of restraint, but they aren't because they're black men. When you have large groups of white folks who have been brainwashed part of them probably willingly so, into believing that their government is being taken over by somebody else, and now they got to storm the Capitol. That's okay. They get to go home minus one person who got shot, right? Tamir Rice was a kid in Ohio where it's an open carry state with an airsoft pistol and was shot within 2 seconds of an officer arriving on site. Where was his restraint? Why do we have to keep coddling these domestic terrorists and making them believe that they have equal footing in our society? Why do they get access to the public square and Tamir Rice does not? How come? I would love someone to explain this to me. We tell the world, we sell this idea, we market to the world that we are the greatest country on earth, but yet we treat people as if they're not even second class, they're third or fourth class citizens. You could be shot on sight just because. But yet, you can storm the Capitol. Maybe you'll get arrested, maybe you won't.
And you have the former president saying that, in fact, the exact quote from his conversation with one of the Fox News hosts, that on January 6th, there was zero threat. Right from the start, it was zero threat, he said. Some went in and they were hugging and kissing the police and guards. They had great relationships. A lot of people were waved in, and they walked in and they walked out. He says about what's happening to those people who just walked in and walked out. They're doing things to them. They're persecuting these people. They're persecuting. Now, I don't know what affection is in the Trump family, but stabbing someone with the flag and hitting them in the head with a fire extinguisher is not something that I consider affectionate. But it's interesting how they're trying to rewrite the history of that day that was just a couple of months ago.
And they're wanting, and they don't realize, and we saw this. We watched what happened. Mm-hmm. For him to come and say something like that. I mean, Donald Trump is clueless. And I hate that we continue having to talk about him because he's always in the news. But I mean, it's absolute garbage. I mean, I know we're getting ready to talk about, the murder mm-hmm. of George Floyd. And it's hard for anybody that is, of our color, you, Rick, and Scott, and myself, to even grasp what it's like in their world, mm-hmm. But what we saw with George Floyd, I'm telling you, and I keep saying this, until we tie police brutality to the police officer's retirement, they're never going to stop. Because you know what? Chauvin's going to go to prison, and he better go to prison. He damn well better go to prison. But Chauvin cost the city of Minneapolis $27 million in a lawsuit, not to mention the damage done after he murdered George Floyd. Until we start holding police officers accountable for what they do, it's never going to change. And I mean, it's only going to get worse. And it just amazes me how, I thought when President Obama won, and then when he won re-election, I thought we were beyond this. And Donald Trump showed us that we are far from it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. But, today the story coming out of the trial is one of the lieutenants said that it was totally unnecessary what Chauvin did. And if you watch this trial, and I've watched as much as I can of it, there's no way I can see him being found not guilty. And I don't know how you could find him not guilty of the most serious charge. And I think there should have been more serious charges. Have you guys been paying attention to the trial?
He's been actually brought up on not charges, but 26 times before George Floyd. He's been known for police brutality and doing those things. So once again, that's it. That's the problem. Is it's always a slap on the wrist to the police officers.
Right. I do want to say real quick. I hope. While on one hand, I appreciate you all saying you expect these charges to stick and he's going to get arrested and go to jail. I would not have my hopes up for that. We are the same generation. All of us are old enough to remember Rodney King being beaten in the street on tape, right? Those officers got off, right? The majority of officers who commit these acts of violence, these heinous acts of violence against people of color, often get off. So I would be pleasantly surprised if he's charged. I would not be surprised. I'm sorry, if he's actually arrested and goes to jail. I would not be surprised if he gets off. That's kind of the bar that America has set. I do find it interesting that you have the chief of police yesterday and the lieutenant today, and several other people saying that the excessive force that was used was no longer required once George had been handcuffed and was on the ground. You didn't need to keep doing that, but yet he continued to do so. And what's also striking about that is that there are 4 other officers involved who did nothing to help, right? Like, you are not your job. You are a human being first, right? There is no such thing as a blue light. They can take the uniform off, right? You can't take your black skin off. I'm stuck with this, right? But yet these 4 officers watched another officer with a knee in a man's neck that was unnecessary and brutal. They did nothing. Where was their humanity, right? And I think what causes this stuff to keep happening is that you have bad people who are in positions of power, whether they are in the police or in the legislature, who simply turn a blind eye. And then you have the police union who want to demonize the victim. We can all be Democrats and be pro-union, right? But there's still people who do the wrong thing when they have positions of power. And the police union has an exorbitant amount of power and influence, and they allow these things to happen. They should be the first ones to step up, because if you have one bad person doing those things, it does pollute the pool for the rest of you. I firmly believe that there are more good cops than bad cops, but until good cops start turning in and arresting those bad cops, they're all bad.
Nope, you're right.
They
And look,
really make it happen themselves.
no, in my neighborhood, everyone's got the "I support the police" signs in their front yard, and I said I'll put one in my yard, but I want to amend it. I support the police when they don't do bad things, when they're not wrong, and I think that's a fair where we should be. We want to support our police, but when they screw up, you got to hold them accountable like anybody else.
I want them to protect and serve everybody, not just the people that are the same color they are.
Right. Absolutely. Right.
Scott, you going to jump in?
You know, I box. I've done martial arts for years. We have, you know, 2 men and George Floyd, 2 police officers that are armed, and then 2 others on the sidelines. I think there are 4 total. I know there's that one guy that was standing to the side. Mm-hmm. There's no reason for you to have it on his neck, like, at all. Like, there's no reason for you to actually use that force. The only reason you use that force is to kill someone. Like, that is the only reason in self-defense. Like, you don't put yourself in positions where if you're going to do something that has lethal intentions whatsoever, even punching someone in the face, it can kill someone. So, like, you better be ready for that. That has to be your intent. And so you have to wonder, like, he knew where it was. He knew he was stopping and breathing. He knew all of this, and he wasn't even moving. And so it just didn't make any sense. Now, they brought up some great points about just privilege and not being able to understand. I mean, I've been in the car with one of my friends who's black, and we're driving, and I think I was speeding like 9 miles an hour over the speed limit, get pulled over. You know, I roll down the window and I immediately start screaming at the police officer. I'm like, what the F are you doing? I wasn't even speeding that fast. Who is your commanding officer? He gave me his number. He looked shaken and scared. And my friend was terrified to the right of me. I didn't even recognize what was going on here, but his hands were up here. And I'm just sitting here, just la, 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 la. And the cop basically gave me his card, went away. I called his supervisor. I filed a complaint. I drove away with no ticket. And like, these are things that I didn't even comprehend. You have to really get into the front there. I've been at protests where I've separated people, and it's accidentally like a police officer here, and they look like they're going to hit, and then they look at me, and I can tell them stop. They're like, they just stop. And it feels like it's because I'm white. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they look at me, oh, my bad. You're not a person of color. So it's just like, there's really mindset, and there's not enough training done. There's people who have guns who shouldn't, police officers who have guns that shouldn't. There should be some kind of time period where you're trained into it, where you shouldn't have these lethal weapons on you. And at the same time, there should be a better system in place. Like, you shouldn't, if it's a $20 counterfeit bill, you let it go. If you know where he lives and he's neighborhood guy, then you work on the arrest in an appropriate way. You don't have to have a public scene and kill somebody. That was murder. That's what it was. Obviously, he had a past with Floyd, and so I just think that there should be no mercy on people like this. There should be no mercy on the bystanders, the police that sat by. They should have the maximum sentence, and that is the only way you have a deterrent to other police officers, so they don't do it again. And if you keep on getting no guilty, not guilty, not guilty from the jurors, then we need to figure out how to have a better jury and educate the public about what's actually happening. I think social media is helping in that way, at least.
If our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines in Afghanistan and Iraq and Syria have escalation of force and we are held accountable for our actions, then this is a man who lost his life over the potential $20 forged bill. Right. I mean, that right there is something that nobody can grasp. A man lost his life over the potential of a forged $20 bill. That's not, escalation of force.
And we're not even sure it was a forged $20 bill because the kid was on the stand.
The cashier said he'd spot the $20 out of his paycheck. He said, I don't, okay, if it's forgery or whatever, I'm not going to go after him. And then his boss made him go after him.
But I think it turned out to be not even forged.
Yeah, that's where we don't know 100% if it was or not. But Scott, you brought up a point where you said that they're not trained, and I disagree. I think they're trained exactly to do this. And one of the things that I remember as a kid is
not trained properly is what I'm saying. Sorry.
Well, they're trained to. When they arrest somebody, they're trained to slam people on the ground and immobilize them. There's no more put your hands on the car and put your hand behind your back. It's tackling them, slamming them to the ground, and in a gang taking care of them. I would argue they were trained to do exactly what he did. And I don't, maybe you guys will disagree with me, but I don't believe that this guy intentionally showed up to murder George Floyd. I believe that he was doing whatever he was doing and had no concern for his humanity. I don't believe that he intended to kill him. I believe he just had no humanity in him. Go ahead, attack.
But I think that's what's going on across this country is we have a lot of people out there that have no humanity for people of color.
Mm-hmm. And here's the thing, though, to talk about training. Every Black parent has had the talk with their Black child about how to behave when you get pulled over or you have an interaction with the police. So we have that kind of training, and that's ingrained in us at a very early age. But it creates this real unfortunate dichotomy between people of color and the police, where we tend to be more afraid of police rather than being expected to be protected by them. And in Chauvin's case, I think he just failed to embody humanity, but he failed to see George Floyd's humanity. He failed to recognize that I am physically hurting and potentially killing another human being who simply does not deserve it. He's unarmed, he's already handcuffed, and there are several other people with knees on his body as well. We don't need another knee in his neck. I wish someone would have had a talk with Chauvin to explain to him what it means to be a person of color, and just simply said, hey, this is another human being, not someone you need to be afraid of. And I think that while there might be training that exists within the police force that almost encourages excessive force, I think when you talk about things like defund the police, which I don't use the phrase, I think I don't use that phrase. I think what needs to happen is that you need to have better police responding. So police shouldn't be responding to every call. You should have mental health providers be able to respond when there's a mental health case, because in many situations, it is the police that causes the actual problem. There might be something festering, but the police make it infinitely worse and can make it a potentially deadly situation. And I think when you have an over presence of police and over reliance on police response, I think you constantly get things like this because you skip steps. You skip those kinds of training mechanisms that would enable someone to say, I don't need to do X, Y, and Z. But if you're so anxious to get police involved all the time, there's no way you can train enough people to be as responsive as people think they need to be.
It's an excellent point. Anybody else got a thought on this? The training angle? See, I think the training for me is this is what they've been trained to do, and you always hear them yelling and stop resisting, even though they aren't resisting, so that they can exert force and I think actually cause harm. I think that's part of it.
I think that sometimes I watched a video the other night, and it was a TikTok video, and it showed a cop, and he was trying to handcuff a guy, and he just started punching him in the back of the head. The guy was face down on the ground, and he started punching him. And then a guy come on and said, "I'm going to tell you what happened." And he was telling him about what they do when they twist the handcuffs, because it makes it more painful for the person they're arresting. And then, when the person on the ground starts to fidget because he's in pain, it gives the officer the look that, well, this guy's trying to, resist. So I'm popping him a couple times. And these are tactics that some bad police officers, enjoy.
Right.
It's a horrible, horrible tragedy all the way around. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
It's a once-in-a-generation investment in America, unlike anything we've seen or done since we built the interstate highway system and the space race decades ago. In fact, it's the largest American jobs investment since World War II.
Green News Report special coverage. President Biden unveils sweeping American jobs plan to rebuild the nation's infrastructure and take on the climate crisis.
That special coverage straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Democrats want to sell this a $3 trillion infrastructure plan, which includes energy efficiency in buildings, 5G, rural broadband, retraining of workers, lots of stuff, roads, bridges, ports, rail lines, redoing the electrical grid, vehicle charging stations. It sounds very ambitious considering the last guy couldn't build a wall.
This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, at long last, finally, an infrastructure bill that you can be excited about.
Oh, definitely.
Calm down there.
President Joe Biden unveiled a sweeping infrastructure jobs plan in a speech in Pittsburgh on Wednesday. His American Jobs Plan proposes spending $2 trillion over 8 years to rebuild America's crumbling infrastructure, part of his Build Back Better pledge, a long list of projects that economists project would create millions of jobs in the short run and strengthen American global competitiveness in the long run. It would also begin to address accelerating climate impacts that already are costing Americans billions in damages every year and set the nation on the path to a net zero emissions economy by 2050. It is truly huge, with a 25-page White House fact sheet, but here's a broad overview. It would rebuild and update America's decaying physical infrastructure, repairing roads, bridges, ports, airports, railways, highways, schools, water systems, flood controls, and more, with a focus on climate resilience, modernize the electric power grid, and set a national clean electricity standard to phase out fossil fuels and reach 100% carbon-free electricity by 2035. Replace all lead water service lines.
Well, that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, and ensure all Americans have access to affordable broadband internet service. It would transform the nation's largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, our transportation system, away from fossil fuels by boosting domestic electric vehicle manufacturing, adoption, and investing in a national electric vehicle charging network by 2030. Use the power of the government purse to revive U.S. manufacturing and domestic supply chains by electrifying the entire federal vehicle fleet. And invest in advanced clean energy research and development to boost U.S. global competitiveness and productivity and counter China's moves to dominate the global clean tech market.
That sounds like a lot.
It is. It would also employ American workers to plug abandoned oil and gas wells and coal mines and ensure a just transition for fossil fuel communities. It would pay farmers to sequester carbon and restore soils, establish a civilian climate corps to employ people to restore landscapes and ecosystem services, clean up pollution, and prepare communities for resilience against coming global warming impacts. Biden would fund this infrastructure jobs plan by increasing taxes on corporations.
Uh-oh.
Economists project the proposal will create millions of good-paying jobs across the country and would reduce the national debt.
Well, that's fine, but you're going to raise taxes on corporations?
Well, now it heads to the meat grinder of Congress.
Uh-oh.
Biden said he welcomes Republican input, but Republicans have signaled they plan to block it as too expensive.
Of course.
But economists say that in general, every $1 spent on public investments like this returns roughly $2 in economic benefits. Now, scientists are warning ever more urgently that time is running out for us to act with the speed and scope necessary to curtail the worst consequences of man-made climate change. Biden's proposal establishes the groundwork for equitably decarbonizing the U.S. economy by 2050, a multi-generational challenge. Biden closed his speech in Pittsburgh with this.
Imagine what we can do. Imagine knowing that you're handing your children and grandchildren a country that will lead the world in producing clean energy technology and will need to address one of the biggest threats of our time. That's what we'll do. If we act now, in 50 years, people are going to look back and say, this was the moment that America won the future.
Imagine that. Now all we have to do is get the progressive Democrats who say this is not nearly enough and the conservative Democrats who say this is too expensive and completely ignore the Republicans because they're not going to go along with anything. Other than that, get this through Congress, get this through the filibuster in the Senate, and everything will work out just fine.
Easy peasy.
For much more on that story and all of them that we couldn't cover today because of it, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, big announcement, Major League Baseball moving the All-Star game out of Atlanta. Looks like there's some repercussions for going back to Jim Crow type voting restrictions. And you got Delta, I think Delta came out, I think Koch's come out and said some things. The Heritage Foundation losing their ever-loving freaking mind that it's just the liberals going after good businesses because these are good reforms. Here to share some thoughts on, well, the good reforms. I've got our all-star panel, our good friend Khary Penebaker, Rich Ojeda, and, of course, Scott Dworkin. Guys, what do you think? All-star game out of Georgia, good thing?
I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're actually doing something about it. It's like when somebody gets, killed in a gun shooting, all they want to do is say thoughts and prayers. The Major League Baseball is actually doing something about it.
They absolutely are. And it's unfortunate that it's taking Major League Baseball to do something like that to get people's attention, where Republicans are reinforcing the idea that if voting wasn't so important, that Republicans wouldn't work so hard to keep us from doing it. They are doing these things to prevent more and more people from exercising their right to vote. All the while, they could be working just as hard as reinforcing the idea that you should be voting and enhancing those rights, but they don't want to. They don't want people to actually vote. They don't want people's voices to be added to the conversation. They want to steal that and then codify it into law. And it does sometimes take the corporate side of our country to stand up and say, hey, we're not going to help support that. The downside to this is that it's going to be all of those people who were counting on the financial benefit of having the All-Star game participate in their state and in their city. So now you have businesses that are going to lose money, but that will inspire them to say, hey, our government is causing this to happen to us. It ain't black people. It ain't Major League Baseball's fault. It's the people that they continue to elect who simply don't value them. They want to choose not only who is voting, but who they get to vote for. Yeah. They want to create this kind of like chaos amongst themselves where they only get to be the arbiters of the outcome. This also is a state where, Donald Trump tried to convince the Secretary of State and the governor to do something that was illegal. They should be going after that guy.
Yeah.
Not going after the people who are honest and just simply want to vote. There are people who fought, bled, and died for our rights to vote. But yet you have these people who are simply upset and unwilling to accept a fair outcome and now want to rig it so they can determine it for other people later on. These are the people who cloak themselves in freedom. Remember that.
Scott, you got a thought?
Absolutely. I mean, the Republicans are super furious that there are consequences to passing racist voting laws. I mean, there's, I would say that if they maybe repealed the law, then the Major League Baseball All-Star Game will stay. They talk about cancel culture when in reality, I think we're using this word now as consequence culture, where the people who are actually doing the canceling is when they pass this slimy bill, that was the canceling. That's the person that's actually doing that. The consequence then comes after. And what this is that we're seeing, and we're still getting organized, we do not have our feet down yet, localizing the resistance. And what's going to happen is they're outnumbered in every way. And when we have our international push, especially on our national push, focused on one state at a time, they can't handle the pressure. Corporations can't handle the pressure. Nobody else can handle the pressure. You don't have the former guy to distract from everybody else. There's a lot of things that are going on there. We presented a plan to different corporations. We presented our boycott plan for them. We presented our boycott plan for Major League Baseball. We presented our for the Masters too. They kind of ignored us. And all of a sudden we have Coca-Cola and Delta and everybody speaking out. Then you have Texas doing the same thing. That's great, but we also want to make sure that you freeze all donations to anybody who passed this law. What they're trying to do is they're trying to blame us for them doing something that should be illegal. And they're trying to make it so it's harder for people to vote because they can't win if everybody votes. And that's the bottom line, maybe because your ideas are stupid.
I think Scott said it best, though, is that the best definition to me of cancel culture is Republican legislatures trying to cancel people's right to vote. Simple.
Yeah.
That's really what cancel culture is.
And you also got to know that every one of these bills has a lead sponsor, and nobody wants to have a legacy like that. And we need to find out every state that pushes these horrible voting, bills. We need to find their lead sponsor and make them famous for being the garbage that they are.
Yeah,
Guess who's investigating them? I'm investigating Republican leadership in every state that is passing these garbage laws, which is about half of the states.
That's what we like to hear.
Yeah.
But what's got the most attention out of all of this that I think in our media is not that they're doing all of the the GOP wish list, but it's the fact that you can't hand out food while people are standing in line. And I'm like, that's the least of it. Maybe if you wrap it in one of those palm cards that the candidates hand out, can we do that then?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they don't. The problem here is that they have no real interest in improving access to the polls. They want to do everything they can to discourage people from voting because they know that the fewer people that vote, the better chance they have because our policy is bad. They don't want people to testify to how good their policy is or how bad their policy is. They know they don't have the cheerleaders like we do. They know they can't create the benefit to a broader swath of people like we can. So the best way to do that is to reduce the amount of people that can go vote. And I think that says more about them, their character, and how lousy their policy is than anything else. And I think ultimately we have to get to a point as Democrats and stop equivocating on things. Stop trying to I don't want anyone to be mean-spirited or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. We need to be able to call this what it is. This is theft. Right? This is the antithesis of being American when you're trying to steal someone's sacred right to vote. And we let them get away with it for far too long.
Yeah, and this is why we need H.R. 1 to pass. This is why you absolutely got to be on the phones calling representatives and senators and all that. Real quick, last thoughts on H.R. 1. Do we get this through?
I hope so. Like I said, I messaged Joe Manchin and told him that I hoped it was going to pass, and he said he likes some of it and he hopes it goes through. So we'll see.
Scott?
Yeah, we'll get it to pass.
Khary?
Without a doubt.
I have my fingers crossed, man.
Yeah, I do as well. It is one of these things again that we've got to demand. And I had Congressman Andy Levin on the show last night, and he said, "Look, we've got to force them. We've got to do like past generations have done, and push Joe Biden and push the senators to do what we want them to do and to do the things that we want to do." Guys, I appreciate the time. Good talking with you, Scott, Rich, Khary. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, brother.
Again, this is one of those moments where you've got to contact your representatives, contact them early, contact them often, and say, look, we got to get H.R. 1 done. We got to get this infrastructure plan put through, and we got to make sure that the PRO Act is in that infrastructure plan. So not only do we rebuild our country, but we rebuild the most prosperous working class in the history of civilization. Just some of my thoughts. I'd love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Again, early, often, contact them. It's what we need to be doing to make sure that we move forward. Because look, I've said this before. If we don't get this infrastructure plan pushed through, if this doesn't happen, the Democrats are going to get slaughtered in 2022, and the Republicans, they know it. So if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com, that's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go, wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come